What percentage of your shots do you use a light meter?
80, probably 80%. The only time I really don't, and especially if flash is involved, is if I'm using my speed lights and I'm using the ETTL system on my speed lights, which is now fabulous. And we're gonna start with that when we go outside in a bit. And there's nothing I'm gonna teach you there that is of value other than turn this button on and let me show you how good it can be. Then we'll do some other things with that. But primarily, the exposure is ridiculously accurate. It's really, really accurate for that. But certainly in the studio and with any just direct ambient light without flash, I would never shoot without my light meter. And I use Sekonic, the L758DR meter, which I think is the smartest meter in the world, until you drop it. and it quickly becomes the stupidest meter in the world.
That is a problem.
It is an issue.
Photomaker, when you're talking about the Disney shot, will the additive effect of a flash, like on the Disney model, do the same thing as putting her in the shade and then shooting her?
Yeah, except I lose the contrast. I lack the drama. It does, and that's a great point. But you lose the drama, and for me, that drama it's Hollywood. We've still got to create drama sometimes, and just make a picture that just sings. I think our goal is this. I listened to a guy, Sam Abel from National Geographic. I listened to Sam lecture in Santa Fe one summer, and Sam said, he said I had a picture in one of the Geographic issues, and I was watching a guy across the aisle, and I know he's about to come up to one of my pictures, and he's just watching to see what the guy does. And when you're reading a magazine, even just not as a photographer, but as a magazine reader, you're sitting there and you're just turning the page, right? We're just turning the page. What your pictures have to do is in some way make people stop turning the page and just go, wow. Even for a second. If you can do that, then you succeeded. And if I had put her in the shade instead of using the flash, it wouldn't make you stop turning the page. So.
Love that. So just a quick follow-up, and then I know we've got a question here in the audience. Krakazar says, so in what situations will you use flash in addition to the natural light?
I'm a little different than most photographers. There are 3 ways to use a flash outside. And that is as a fill light, as a main light, and as a light that is exactly balanced to be the same output as the ambient light. Those are the only 3 ways you can use a flash outdoors. I use a flash different than all of that. My goal for a flash is to do one thing and one thing only, give me control over the brightness of my ambience. I can't separate my subject and my ambience ever until I introduce flash. Once I separate those two with my flash, then I can control my ambient brightness levels. That's the only reason I use it. I don't use it because of trying to get great light on the face. I can come up with other ways to do that. But I do use it because it gives me that extra little control over my backgrounds that I otherwise would not have.
That's amazing. Love it.
Yeah.
Question in the audience?
Yeah, Julie?
I had a question about the softbox you had on the girl by the motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
So you were feathering the light coming off of that. So I assume there's nothing in the softbox to stop the light from following the shape of the softbox. Is that how you do that?
Correct. Yeah, and I mean, ideally I would have had a grid, a set of soft grids or honeycomb or there's all kinds of different names for them, but a soft grid on that softbox, then I wouldn't have had the issue. But I didn't have one with me that day. So that could have been easily corrected if I just had a grid. But I didn't, so I had to keep it and I had to feather it off of the ground a little bit. And that was the whole point. So, yeah, good point. Subtractive lighting, again, it's one of the 4 applications, along with additive. And subtractive means, in this case, this is me shooting from standing out in my driveway on a bright sunny day. She is inside the garage, and my backdrop is hanging behind her. This is one of my backdrops. I use a ton of backdrops from White House. And this is basically, here's the setup. Well, here's a couple more examples. I'm wild about this backdrop. But here's how this is lit. Not everybody has a studio. You don't have to have a studio. You need a big source of light. And that's what I was saying earlier. I don't care where I get the light from. I just need light. And so here's what's happening. There's my set shot. Right? So on the left side, the picture up on the top, I'm standing inside the garage shooting across, and she's split lit. So she's lit, half her face is lit. See that? The one on the bottom, the bigger one, is when I'm shooting straight into the garage. And you can see I've got my backdrop back there at a bit of an angle. And I end up kind of moving around. I move myself around. Again, I can't move that softbox. It's not a softbox, it's a garage door. I can't change that. I have to change her and me relative to that. Make sense? This is a way that a lot of people can work, and you can work year-round this way. It doesn't really matter where you live. There's some really great pictures to be taken with a garage door. You want them inside the garage far enough that if you think about subtracting light, let's think about having something overhead. Well, think about here's the edge of my garage, and here I'm outside, and here's the top of my garage door right here. If I'm here, my light source is coming straight down this way. If I back up a foot, now my light source is coming in at this kind of an angle. If I back up another step, now my light source is coming in at a different angle. Get the idea? So you can place your subject anywhere underneath that garage door opening relative to what you want those highlights in the eyes to look like, and what kind of quality on the face, and where you want those shadows to fall. And it's big, soft source. And you can, if I'm in, like in the bottom picture, if I'm shooting from out and shooting straight in, it's a pretty flat lit face. But if I move over to the side and I'm shooting at a 45 shooting into the garage, now I've got Rembrandt light. I've got 3-to-1 ratio light. I've got 45-degree main light. Make sense?
I was just going to ask, so in this lower picture here, she's set back in the shade to keep the direct sunlight off of her.
Right.
You're using the garage floor and the wall as big reflectors to bounce
Absolutely.
the light into her.
Absolutely.
And you've probably raised your ISO to compensate for her being in that dark area with the light.
It's not nearly as dark as you think.
Okay.
I've kept my ISO probably at 200 here.
Oh, nice.
And the reason for that is I like to work wide open. So I'm probably at least at 4, I would guess. I've sort of taken to that 7200 f4 lens more than the 7200 2.8. And the reason is it's less than half the weight. Less than half the weight, and it's $1,300 less. I'm just saying, And the only reason for me for the 2.8 versus the 4 was for the speed. The fall off is still fall off, and there's great bokeh and out of focus depth of field. But the 4 nowadays, with our ability to bump our ISO wherever we want, I'm not at a loss for speed. So the 4 is fine, and I find it to be my favorite new lens in the whole line. I use that lens every day, and it weighs nothing. I don't mind taking it anywhere. My hand doesn't hurt at the end of the day. So.
Can you repeat the focal length on
Yeah,
that?
it's a 7200 f4 Canon lens. Yeah, f4 as opposed to the 2.8, which is very heavy. It's a great lens, but it's really heavy.
Just so you know, Tony, there's a lot of people out there who think that must be a set because there's no garage that's that clean. So either congratulations or you're fooling us.
You think I'm going to leave all that junk in there and show you the junk? Yeah, that's funny. All right, so there's some of the results that came from that little job. And it just worked out pretty great. No extra work, no assistance needed, no power, no electricity. You just need to open the door, and make it happen. Transmission light, when light goes through an interruption. So think about this. Here's our scenario. It's noon in San Diego, and I'm at the beach. It's screaming bright sunlight on the beach. In fact, it looks a lot like that. Right. I can't have that. I need that late afternoon warmth, that late afternoon softness, but I don't have it, and I've got to shoot at this time of day. So we got to fix that. So one of my students a while back said, well, how did you retouch out the seagull? Rock. Throw a rock. He just retouched himself right out of the shot.
That's pre-touching.
Just kidding. You scream and you wave your arms and the retouching takes place magically. But here's what's happening here. Here's Tiffany, and she's staring at the camera. I've got the light at a 45-degree angle. But look how harsh the shadow is, how sharp the edge of that shadow is. Look at the highlight on her bottom lip. It's really bright. She can't get her eyes open because she's squinting so much. It's just a miserable picture. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a pop-up translucent diffuser, left of camera, and I'm going to place it directly between her and the sun. And it's going to change two things, light quality and light quantity. Light quality is going to get, would you think, softer? Absolutely. What about light quantity? Am I losing light? You bet. And that depends on the density. If you get the, those 6-in-1s from Westcott, those have different densities that you can buy in those diffusers. You can get 3/4 stop, 1 stop, 1.5 stop. I like a 1.5 stop of diffusion because it's just something I'm real comfortable with, and I know the look, and I know it, and I can make it happen fast. So I place that between the sun and her, open up plus 1.5, and I get a great shot of her. What just happened to my background? It just got brighter by a 1.5 stop. So here's the rule. If you're going to use a transmission technique, if you're going to use a diffuser with your subject, start with a medium or a dark background. If you start with a light background and then it gets brighter, you're going to have a problem with your histogram. You'll be white without detail. You'll have blinkies on your camera. We don't want that. So as you'll notice here, as I go forward, watch what happens to the background and notice the difference. All of a sudden, that blue becomes a light blue pastel, and it's out of focus. Get the idea? Make sense? Same thing here. This maternity portrait. This was direct. I couldn't find a place in this woman's home that I really liked to do this picture. And I saw this direct sunlight coming through a window that didn't have a covering over it. I went in her shower, and I took down the white frosted shower curtain, and I taped it over the window. And that became my soft light source. She's like, this guy's a knucklehead. And then she saw this and went, ooh, that's a knucklehead that knew what he was doing. You have to do whatever it takes to get the shot. I tried it. In fact, I did a food shoot in Seattle years ago, and I needed the background to be red, and I didn't have a red gel with me. And I was like, how can I get this red? How can I get this red? And there was a little mini mart, a 7-Eleven kind of a gas station place nearby, and I went, those little mini those little mini cheeses, the Bell something, Baby Bells, they all have red cellophane. Right? And I remember that. I was like, yeah, go get me some cheese. And so we opened all those packages. And I taped it over my flash tube, and I got my red background. You gotta do what it takes to get the job done, right? Cheese light. So here it is again, transmission light. Here's Nicole. Bright sunny day in my backyard. You get yourself a couple of voice-activated light stands. Paul Ernest there, brilliant photographer. That backdrop, when it opened up 2 stops, looks like that on the right. This was just a test to see what that background color would do, and it shifted beautifully. But you can see the light quality on the face. I didn't have anything to start with. And everybody's like, yeah, but we don't have 10 assistants. I know you don't. I didn't either. But you do have a couple of light stands and a couple of clamps, and you can make it work. All these tools are out there to help you get the pictures that you want. So now I'm backlit. Now I'm in the reflective mode where I'm completely backlit. Well, if you open up and expose for the face, boy, do you blow out the hair. You guys have all seen this because the range of contrast just cannot be held. Right? So here's what we have to do. We've got to add light to the face. Right now, my range of contrast is from here to here. I've got my highlight here, and I've got my subject here. And she's properly exposed. Actually, it's kind of like this. So she's right here where she's supposed to be. I've got to add light to the face. So I bring in a white reflector. So I'm bringing up the level of the face, and then I'm bringing the exposure down because I've added the face. And it brings down the hair light with the tonality on her, which results in that. I've got to find a way to bring those two closer together. It doesn't matter how I do it. I can either add light to her and then bring them both down, or I can diffuse the sun behind her and drop it down, or I can add flash to her. I can do 5 different things. It doesn't matter. I've got to get the brightest and the darkest closer together. That's my job. That goes back to the first 3 slides, the white dot, the black dot, and the gray dot. That's all I have is those tonalities, and I got to bring them all and make them all fit on a printed page. People always ask, where do you know where to place the reflector? So think about being on a bright sunny day, and I'm backlit. So I'm photographing Lee, and the light's coming from right back there, so it's coming sort of this direction. I'm just going to look at the ground and find your shadow. Wherever your shadow is, that's where I'm going to stand and hold up my reflector. Everybody's like, how do you find? Sometimes you can't see when you're reflecting, you can't see. Stand in the shadow, you will. If I stand in the shadow and hold up a reflector, you're going to get bright. So much so you're going to go, whoo. So, yeah. Make sense? Any questions about that reflector thing? Its job is to handle my contrast and smooth out the contours of the face a little bit. Smooths up, ruddy skin can get smoothed up real quick if you properly use a reflector. It's all about control. Thomas, one of the great guy right there. Great model, great cowboy. He's been in a ton of movies.
Just a quick clarification for BJL Photo. Did you say you bring in a reflector and then lower shutter speed?
I bring in the reflector, and I have to change my exposure based on the ad. So think about this. If I'm photographing Lee and I take an incident reading of her face, it reads, let's say 60 at f8. And I shoot, and then I've got a great exposure for face, but I've got this great strong lighting that's just blowing out her hair. Now, I bring in my handy dandy white reflector, and I bring it in. Okay, good, I like that right there. Now I take a new reading of her face. And it doesn't really matter if I increase the shutter speed or if I close down the aperture. I've just got to change and adjust the exposure so that the exposure is now based off of the reflector. Doesn't matter which I use.
Perfect.
Because I'm not using flash. If I'm using flash, all bets are off. But with ambient light, it doesn't matter. The only deciding factor there is, are you tied to a certain shutter speed for a certain reason? Or a certain aperture for a certain reason. Maybe it's based on what you need in the background or don't need in the background. So something like that. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of personal work. One of the things that I'm a little bit of a different guy. I'm a little bit different than most. Photography for me was never a hobby. My first picture that I ever took, other than one that we found in my family pictures from when I was about 7, where I had a camera on my neck and I should have shot our family. Other than that, I never was a hobbyist. I started in photography as a pro. My first picture was taken on a Hasselblad, and it was for a paying client. First picture I ever took. I was trained for 3 months by my brother-in-law, and I watched him every single day, and then he turned me loose with a client. So it took years before photography before I really loved photography. It was just a job. And when the studio closed, I would go home. It took probably 10 or 12 years before I went, I love this. And this is what I'm going to do every day the rest of my life. So it took a long time. So therefore, I never experienced the desire or need of self-expression or wanting to do personal work or have a project in my head. But I've been following the Beatles for so many years. And so I've got this project that I'm working on that's a nonstop it's an ongoing thing now, where I'm photographing things that the Beatles referenced in songs. So I found in Liverpool, the gravesite of Eleanor Rigby. Across the street from where John and Paul met. And I photographed my headshot that was up earlier that was taken at Strawberry Fields in Liverpool, the real one, not the one in New York, but the one in Liverpool. And so I find that I'm doing that, and that's a project that's just ongoing, and I've got an opportunity to maybe do an exhibit in Liverpool on that. But other than that, since I moved back to Texas, I've been in San Diego for more than 20 years, and I moved back to Texas not long ago. And which is where my family is from, and that's where I started my career. My first studio was in Texas. And I found pretty quickly that Texans are nuts about their flag. There's not a state in this country that they have more pride in their flag than the state of Texas. They're maniacs about their flag, and they put it on everything. And I kept seeing it used in some unusual ways. And I thought, all right, there's a project here. There's a story here. So in the last year, I've started working on this project that's called Lone Star Legacy, a celebration of Texans and their beloved flag. I've already talked to a publisher about this, and this project is going to see the light of day pretty soon. But I'm not through shooting it yet. But let me just show you some of the funky things that I'm talking about here. And they're all outdoor. They're all ambient light. They're all available light. And then we'll dig back into this after we come back from our break. So, you're out driving across the country and you see things like this. And it's like, what does this mean? But they will pop up in the most unusual places. And for me, it was just fun driving around these back roads. And I didn't start out looking for that. It was just something I just started noticing. Well, as I've told a few of my Texas friends that I'm working on this project, Well, now they're all calling me and sending me texts and emails saying, go down Route 204-3, go over the cattle guard and look to your right. You'll see a water tower, I mean, the flag is everywhere. And it's not just that it's the flag, but it's how it's been used to me. And it's funny. It's very funny. There's a few things I can't show you that I'm not going to show you. I believe this was a meth lab, but I'm not going to talk about that. I was a little scared on that picture. This is my favorite, this Airstream trailer. It's just fun. It's just fun stuff. And I think that's part of this that for me was fun, was just look at all these unusual things that happen. And I know that so many photographers and so many fine art people that have a voice and they have things to tell, they work on these self-projects. And I never understood that. I never got, why would you care? Why would I care about what you like? And then I got passionate about something. And then it's like, you mean you don't like what I like? And all of a sudden I changed and became a different guy. But it's everywhere. And it's on mailboxes, it's on trucks, it's logos, it's windmills. It's very fun. Cowboy boots, everything. So I won't bore you with much more of this, but I throw that out there because I really do think that we as photographer, here's the whole side of the building was the entire thing. And here a truck, the whole truck is the flag, So I guess what I'm mostly saying is I'm encouraging you guys to dig up a project. This is the Texas Motor Speedway. By the way, I was fortunate. I recently got to get on that track at Texas Motor Speedway and get in a NASCAR car and go 165 miles an hour on a track. I got 2 speeding tickets right after that. I love to go fast. I didn't know this about me until I got in a NASCAR with a driver. Holy moly, at about 160, 165, all of a sudden you start tingling all over. And it's a religious experience, boy, I'll tell you. It's a cool thing. But as you can see, like I say, I've got hundreds of these things already, and I haven't even been looking very hard. But it's everywhere. There's taxidermy shop, and look at the deer in the window staring at me. This old gate on the farm. So anyway, I'm about done with that. But I wanted to wrap that part up. A kid at his high school prom, I just thought it was fun. And I was going to retouch off his pimples, but I thought, nah, he's a high school kid at his prom. He needs the pimples. Cufflinks, everything. So it's pretty funny. I want to make sure that we don't have any questions left, but I do want to, I'm pretty big with quotes. On the plains of hesitation bleached the bones of countless millions who at the dawn of victory sat down to wait, and waiting died. If there's something you need to do, and if there's something you want to say, and if there's something you really need to work on, go do it. Start it tomorrow. Start it this afternoon. But start it. Don't wait. And that's the message that I got when I finally found something that I was passionate about, whether it's my Beatles collection of pictures or my Beatles memorabilia collection, which is enormous now. Whatever it is, if you got to find passion. And it's funny, I was telling my daughter's 23 and in college and getting a master's in art history. And I said, you've got to find passion every day. And I think inspiration every day. And I think that you need to either be inspired every day or find a way to inspire someone every day. But I think the word inspiration needs to exist in all of us as image makers, because we have something to say, and people want to hear what we have to say, I think.